climb, but it's also hard to roll down without going too fast. It's also the site of not one, not two, but three runaway trains. This is the story of the first one, where it all began. Helps slow the train down. Still, they apply their air brakes to hold it at a constant 25 miles an hour. That's exactly where Holland wants it, since that's a safe speed. Then something odd happens. Despite the air brakes, brakeman Crown notices that the train is slowly creeping up to 30 miles an hour. Slightly speeding, but then it creeps up faster. 35, 40, 50, even 65. At that point, they try and throw it into emergency, which kind of works. It's not enough. The brakes begin to burn up, and the train begins to fly down the hill as fast as 90 miles an hour. Way too fast. At this point, the engineer wasn't even in control anymore. He and the rest of his crewmen became passengers, and gravity has hijacked the controls. They call ahead to West Fulton Terminal, informing them about their problem. Then Frank remembers that there's a set of houses at San Bernardino, right beside a curve. It was right there that the crew lost all hope. Right beside a curve. It was right there that the crew lost all hope. Locomotives jump the tracks and the hoppers tumble down behind, flying through the houses like nothing. Petronas spills everywhere, covering what wasn't crushed, like a sandstorm that just went by. Literally every car and every engine jumped the track. People were still having their breakfast or taking a shower when this rude awakening came through their neighborhood.
Yeah.
When the dust settled, the site was a complete mess. People feared something like this would happen, and now that nightmare was reality. Some people were even buried in what was once their homes. Even a swimming pool was no match for the train. The lead engines that suffered the worst damage lay upside down or on their sides, still smoldering, while the two helpers were mostly upright from the crash. Frank Holland amazingly climbs out of his crushed lead unit, but is badly injured with a punctured lung and several cracked ribs. The two crew members in the helper unit were lucky and escaped very serious injury. Since they were at the back, it received the least amount of force when the train came off the track. They desperately called dispatch for emergency services. Sadly, Dr. Crown was fatally killed in the lead unit, along with Alan Reese in the third. Additionally, two other people in their homes were killed, including 7-year-old Jason Thompson and 9-year-old Tyson White, who were crushed and asphyxiated when the train destroyed one of their houses along Duffy Street.
Man, go put the fucking cups back. They not for you to play.
Why? Vandals? Kinked air hose? Faulty brakes? A sleepy crew? What was it? Well, before that could be answered, there was still more trouble. No one realized that the train derailed on an underground gas pipeline buried 6 feet underground. Two trains on the same line. One is out of control. One has hundreds of passengers. And they're on a collision course. This is the story of the Hinton train collision. On the early morning of February 8, 1986, Via Rail's number 4 train, the combined Supercontinental and Skeena, was traveling from Jasper, Alberta to the city of Edmonton. The train consisted of 2 baggage cars, 2 coaches, a dome car, 3 sleeper cars, 2 steam generator cars, and 3 vintage engines, which were FP76566, F96633, and FP96300, which was in the middle of the train, but not in operation. So why was the train in such an awkward order like this? This was the result of combining 2 different trains into one for the long journey, with the 2 lead units and 5 cars coming from Vancouver, and the second section with the inoperative unit and 5 cars coming from Prince Rupert. The sleeper car and the steam generator on the back of the train were on their way to Edmonton for maintenance work. 94 passengers, 14 stewards, and a crew of 7 were on board the train. Unfortunately, this long, relaxing transcontinental ride was about to come to a crashing end. It's a great day. Nationals train 413 is on its way to Jasper, about to make its stop at Edston for a crew change. The crew hasn't had much sleep, but stand on the platform waiting for the train. Today, 413 is huge. It consists of 3 engines, GP38-2W5586, and 2 ST40s, 5062 and 5104. They are pulling a high-speed snow spreader, 35 hoppers of grain, 7 flatbeds with large pipes, 45 hoppers with sulfur, 20 loaded tankers with all kinds of hazardous goodies, 6 more grain hoppers, and finally a caboose, making it a total of 6,124 feet long. That's just short of 2,000 meters. On this leg, engineer John Hudson and brakeman Mark Edwards will be in the lead unit, with the conductor Wayne Smith, known as Smitty, riding in the caboose. The crew board the train while it's still slowly falling to the edge, which, although illegal and against CN regulations, will help save time to the main line once the Via Rail is cleared. However, like the Chase Maryland collision to come in the next year, this wasn't the case. CN 413 doesn't slow down. It instead rockets through the junction, picking up speed at 59 miles an hour, and forces its way back onto the main line, with no derail to stop them, heading straight for the Via Rail. Conductor Smitty tries to get through to the crew in the lead engine, warning them about the signals he's passing, wondering what were they. But what's going on inside the cab is about to be one of the greatest mysteries of Canadian railroad history. Via Rail number 4 is departing Newton, which will be the last time it will ever make a scheduled stop. As the train is making its way to Dalehurst, World War II veteran Kenneth Cuttle is sitting in the dome car, and he sees a horrifying sight. CN 413 is right in front of Via Rail 4, on the same track. And then, it happens. The 2 trains smashed head-on into each other like 2 charging rams at a combined speed of nearly 125 miles an hour, around the same speed Regional 94 was going when it smacked into the 3 Conrails at Chase. Car after car bashed into each other, and one hopper is even launched into the air and crushes a coach like a Japanese sumo wrestler. Finally, everything stops. The dome car, where Kenneth Cuttle was sitting in, was just inches away from being crushed by the pile of twisted steel and metal. The locomotives and some tanker cars from the CN are buried and are beginning to burn. When the caboose of the CN train slams to a stop, still upright, along with some of the freight cars that did not derail, Smitty spots a huge ball of fire growling ahead of him and calls his crew and dispatch, reporting the crash, and then calls emergency services. At the same time, the conductor of the Via Rail can hear the CN conductor and tells his side of the situation from the passenger train. Smitty then tries to contact his crew, however they never respond, so he heads to the front of the train to investigate, and when 2 officers stop and tell him a small summary of what has happened, the full reality sinks into Smitty. He will never see his 2 crewmen ever again. Finally, 45 minutes later, rescuers finally arrive. what they see is complete bedlam. Two large trains have smashed into each other, and some of the tanker cars and diesel fuel from the engines are burning. Hundreds of people are injured and walking around like zombies after such a horrific crash. 23 people are dead, 71 are injured. Then there's the question, what caused this to happen, and why? It's very unclear why the CN train failed to stop, but there's a lot of plausible thoughts. Engineer Jack Hudson was an alcoholic and a heavy smoker. He was also suffering from both pancreatitis and type 2 diabetes, putting him at risk for a heart attack, stroke, or even a diabetic reaction while in the cab. So it was concluded that he either had a heart attack or stroke or had a diabetic attack leading up to the collision. To add to that, brakeman Mark Edwards and conductor Smitty had a lack of sleep, and it's possible Edwards may have dozed off on duty. However, there's the dead man switch, which is a little pedal that the engineer must keep depressed during operation. If it's let go, a warning goes off after 10 seconds, and if nothing happens, the train automatically stops. However, this was most likely disabled by having a heavy object, like a worn-out brake shoe, put on top of the pedal to cancel out the alarm, because crews found the pedal rather annoying. It's unclear if this has happened, however, because the lead engine was totally destroyed in the collision. Reset safety control, which works a lot like positive train control and other train stop controls, is available, which is when an engineer has 10 seconds to push a reset button or move any control of the train, or it stops. This could have prevented the disaster since the second unit had it, but not the lead engine, due to it not having a comfort cab. Wayne Smith, the sole survivor of the CN train, eventually, nervously, testified about the events of the crash months later. It was noted that the crew were not in good communication with each other between the cab and caboose, even with working radios. Smith said he tried to contact the crew in the lead unit prior to Dalehurst, but other crews listening into the area heard no such calls.
Operating locomotive. He was unable to do so, slipped and fell, and was dragged about 80 feet from the train, receiving minor cuts before he had to let go. Now, with no one on the train, it becomes a runaway, escaping the yard and onto the main line, accelerating faster and faster. The engineer quickly ran to another employee who had a radio, and he called the yardmaster, who promptly notified the Stanley Tower block operator and the train master. The Toledo branch train dispatcher, located in Indianapolis, was also notified. The train was now proceeding southward on the Toledo branch, also known as the Great Lakes Division. At Galedia Siding at approximately 1:35 p.m., the train dispatcher remotely operated a switch for the train to enter the siding. A portable D-rail was there, ready to derail the train and stop this runaway. However, it was thrown clear from the track by the force of the train passing over it, and the train sped on like nothing had happened along the tracks. Then the police come up with an idea. Slowly being depleted and gradually reducing the effectiveness of the locomotive's air brakes.
Yes!
056, the air pressure had dropped so much that the handbrakes
That's what I just
and
said.
air brakes could no longer hold the train, and it slowly began to roll downhill toward the town of Lac Mégantic, just over 7 miles away. With no track circuit to detect the runaway train and alert the rail traffic controller, the train became an unmanned runaway. MMA2 entered the town at 63 miles an hour, entering the curving area with a speed limit of 10 miles an hour. And then the worst happens. 63 of the 72 tank cars, as well as the buffer car, derail, with many of the tank cars rupturing badly from the impact. About 6 million liters of petroleum crude oil was quickly released, and the fire began just almost immediately, generating a ball of fire 3 times the height of the downtown buildings. The fire was so bright you could even see it from space, as NASA's Sumeri NPP satellite took this image of the glow of the fire from space. Crazy. People jumped from the 3rd floor of buildings in the central business district to escape the humongous fire. As the blazing oil flowed over to the ground, it entered the town's storm sewage system and emerged as huge fires towering from over storm sewer drains, manholes, and even chimneys and basements of buildings in the area. Around 150 firefighters were deployed to the scene, describing as looking like a war zone.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Some were called in as far away as the city of Sherbrooke, Quebec, and as many as 8 trucks carrying 30 firefighters were dispatched from Franklin County, Maine, in the U.S. From Chesterville, Eustis, Farmington, Vineyard, Phillips, Wrangell, and Strong counties. AB car were found intact, separated from the rest of the train approximately 800 meters or half a mile east of the derailment site. The equipment that derailed included 63 of the 72 tank cars as well as the buffer car. 9 tank cars at the rear of the train remained on the track and did not explode and were pulled away from the site. Almost all of the derailed tanker cars were damaged beyond repair, many having large breaches. In total, 47 people died, including 93-year-old Elaine Parenthu and siblings Priyanka Melissa Char-Paganche, who was 4. Their mother, 30-year-old Talia Kromi Paganche, also perished. An investigation by the TSB of Canada revealed multiple stunning findings. They found that the train had been parked on the slope with only 5 handbrakes set and did not comply with the federal regulations. At least 9 brakes should have been used to secure the train on the level track, and an additional handbrake applied when on an incline. A local resident even posted video of the unattended locomotive with the cabin door left open and the engine running. And TSB investigators then looked into the air brake system, which is normally charged to 90 psi, and when the engineer reduces air pressure to 65 pounds per square inch to apply the brakes. Investigators tried to determine how the air brakes were released by examining the theory that the relatively small change in air pressure could have produced a pressure wave to trigger and quickly release the air brakes on the cars. However, Wally Kirkpatrick, the manager of the rules and operations at RTC Rail Solutions, said that the air brakes could have just leaked off over time once the engine was shut down. But here's a question. Crude oil usually doesn't ignite readily or just go boom by itself, so there were theories on why it ignited so fast. And this included theories like additives added to the oil to speed up the transfer of the syrup-like oil, which is usually common with shipping via pipelines, but rare for shippings by rail. Or the theory a local propane tank near the derailment site may have exploded when struck by one of the tank cars. High temperatures in Quebec at the time also may have been a factor to the derailment. Now we move on to the troublesome C-30-7. It was discovered that 5017 had a bad reputation of mechanical maladies with MMA, but they kept the unit in service despite its horrible condition. And the repair to its engine was also cheap and lazy, with the use of inappropriate materials that allowed oil to accumulate in the turbocharger and exhaust manifold, resulting in the fire. This is a classic symptom of turbocharger failure, which is very common in GE locomotives, especially the C-30-7. Transport Canada was also at fault for the accident. Transport Canada did not provide
Dude, where's
adequate
that smell?
regulatory oversight to ensure that the associated risks
Oh.
were addressed when the MMA made significant operational changes and limited follow-up on safety deficiencies. Transport Canada also did not follow up to ensure that recurring safety deficiencies were dealt with. So after the accident, Transport Canada was demanded the down relief line toward the north side and had been signaled to cross the main line at South Hall East Junction on its way to South Hall Yard on the south side. As the track straightened ahead of the high-speed train, the driver was gathering his belongings, saw the Classic 89 moving at a flooding angle, and realized that it was actually crossing his path on the up line in front of him. The driver of the freight locomotive observed the approaching high-speed train and expected it to stop, but was alarmed at its speed and apparent brake application. He tried to accelerate his train out of the path of the high-speed train, but nothing could be done to prevent disaster. The trains collide at 13:20. Power car 43-173 sideswipes the hoppers, and the first coach falls onto its side, while the second collided head-on with a hopper, and both were thrown upward, causing the hopper to barely miss the first coach. 6 people died instantly in the collision, and 1 would later die in hospital later on. 139 sustained injuries, and 66 people functioning correctly. In Power Car, the buzzer was sounding continuously, but in Power Car 43-163, the turbo passes under signal SN109 at 65 kilometers or 40 miles an hour, which appears to be double amber. He then accelerates through the signal until... The two trains collide head-on at a combined speed of 210 kilometers an hour at Ladbroke Grove. Power car 43011 ricochets upward off the turbo, causing the turbo to collide dead center on the first coach of the Intercity, resulting in major injuries and death to the occupants of both cars. The middle and rear cars of the turbo were thrown 12 meters backward off the track and onto their side, and the middle car's fuel tank ruptures, turning the crash site into a hell-like inferno. The Mark III coaches near the middle of the train jackknife and pile onto the wreckage. A second fireball erupts, this time in most of the cars falls. 31 people are dead, including both drivers. 523 are injured, mainly suffering second and third degree burns. It is the deadliest crash on British rail in over a decade, and the worst Great Western wreck since the South Hall collision 2 years prior. What could have caused such a catastrophe? They share similarities with...
I still friends